So imagine this, you've hired a caregiving agency and you're assuming, rightfully so, because the agency has told you that their providers, their home health aides, are trained on how to deal with someone who is experiencing dementia, on how to help their client physically, to do some of the physical tasks they have to do, and they're trained on how to communicate best. And then you realize that it doesn't look like they're trained at all. As I became the primary caregiver for my uncle a number of years ago, it got to the point where I had to hire agencies to fill some of the slots that we had as we were providing 24-hour care. I went through 3 agencies as I found that all of them would promise that their caregivers were trained. They knew what to do. We had a camera set up outside, and I would get these cues based on that camera that they were not trained. My uncle had dementia. He started out mild dementia and it progressed. But in that time, he slowly needed more and more hands-on help. And I would often see the camera would go off and my uncle would be walking out onto the porch by himself. The caregiver was nowhere to be seen. And as a physical therapist, that would frustrate me so much. One of the reasons that we had to end up putting my uncle into the facility I work in is because in the course of a week's time, with 24-hour care, he fell 3 times. At that point, he was on hospice and we were hoping to be able to keep him home, but I wasn't able to because I didn't feel like he was safe at home. And at least in a facility, if he fell, there's medical staff right there. I feel like there's a certain amount of accountability that agencies aren't being held to. And so as caregivers, I believe it's up to us to hold them more accountable. Like I said earlier, I went through 3 agencies. I had one agency staff member who brought her laundry and did her laundry while she was supposed to be caregiving. And that wouldn't have necessarily been that big of a deal, except that she didn't ask. She just brought her laundry and did it. So it's things like that that frustrated the heck out of me. And so I want to do this video to talk about some potential questions we can ask the agency themselves first, and then we can ask the specific caregivers that will give us an idea of if they really are trained in, first of all, dementia, if they truly are trained in the things we need them to be trained on. So the first question that I would ask the agency is, can you give me detailed information about the training your caregivers receive? And then I would follow up with, are they specifically trained on dementia? Are they specifically trained on mobility? And then ask, is there ongoing training? Do they have yearly in-servicing, yearly training they have to do to make sure they stay up to date? Another really good question to ask, I think, is can you describe how one of your caregivers might handle a situation where a dementia patient became agitated or disoriented? And then let them tell you what they are training their caregivers to do. Does that make sense? Does what they're saying make sense? So those are an example of some of the questions I might ask to the agency itself. When it comes to the caregiver that's going to be actually providing the care, I'd ask a couple more questions. Imagine your client has dementia and they're refusing to take their medication. How would you handle this situation? Hopefully you'll hear something that involves strategies. So strategies they would use to try to get them to take their medication. That might mean that they try to put it into pudding or ice cream or something. It might mean that they talk about ways that they could influence their client in a different way. For example, your doctor wants you to take these or something like that. Hopefully they would then talk about making sure that the family is aware that they're having some difficulty with getting their loved one to take their medications, and that they would contact the agency. But there should be some kind of strategies that they have in place. You could ask a similar question like, what would you do if there was a fall? So this is going to look at their ability to handle an emergency situation, which is bound to come up when you're caring for elderly people, both with and without dementia. Hopefully they'll say something like, I'd contact the family immediately. If there's a chance that there's an injury, they should leave them on the floor. They should not try to get somebody up. And so hopefully they'll say something like that. If there doesn't appear to be an injury, what my uncle would often do is fall and then jump right back up. So if there doesn't look like there's an injury, at least call the family, contact the agency. They might hopefully say something like continue to assess, have the other caregivers assess as days go on to make sure there's no bruising or continued pain or anything like that. And from my perspective, I think it's really important to ask about how they help people who who are having trouble with getting up or down and walking. Hopefully they will answer with something like, we use a gait belt, I keep my hands on them, or I'm extremely close. If they're not at the level of needing hands on, they're close enough to help protect them from falling. One of the biggest issues we had is that caregivers would be somewhere else and Uncle Billy would get up and move without the caregiver being anywhere in sight. I think another good type of question is to ask, how would you respond to a client who keeps repeating the same thing over and over again? What you hopefully will hear is, I act as if I've heard it for the first time every time, and respond with the same type of answer every time. Hopefully you'll hear something like, I go to where they are. I don't try to bring them to my reality. Trying to bring somebody with dementia into our reality is one of the most frustrating things we can ever do. Frustrating for both the caregiver and the client. So asking a question like, what would you do if your client kept repeating themselves? It's a good question to ask. You can use it to judge the way that they're going to respond to some of the behaviors that they may see. Hopefully today's video was helpful. If it was, please like and share it with anybody you think might find value in it. Also, please subscribe to my channel where I do a lot of videos like this. I also do a lot of videos that are complaining about the healthcare system, but giving more techniques and strategies that we can use to try to provide the best care we can in this broken healthcare system. Thank you.